The morning air over northern Germany carried a quiet chill, the kind that settles over a landscape before history decides to reveal something unexpected. On November 7th, 1943, a lone German test pilot stepped toward a captured P-47 Thunderbolt, its metal skin still cold from the long night. He paused, studying the massive fuselage that seemed almost out of place among the sleek, efficient machines the Luftwaffe considered the pinnacle of wartime engineering. To him, this American fighter looked oversized, inelegant, an unlikely messenger of a new kind of war. Yet in that moment, standing beneath a fading autumn sun, he sensed that the machine before him carried a secret. Not a tactical trick, not a hidden weapon, but a philosophy. A way of waging the World War II air war that Germany had never fully understood. How could something this heavy, this overbuilt, this unapologetically different, become one of the most decisive tools in the US Army Air Force's arsenals? And what did it reveal about the deeper strength, the American industrial power that Germany had underestimated for far too long? To answer that, we must return to the moment everything went wrong for a young pilot from Pennsylvania, and set in motion a chain of discoveries that changed the war in the air. The mission was supposed to be routine, one more escort sweep in a long season of gray skies, freezing winds, and young men learning too early how fragile a cockpit could feel. On that November morning, the US Army Air Forces launched a formation of B-26 Marauders toward Luftwaffe airfields in occupied France. Their guardians were 12 fighters from the 355th Group, each a P-47 Thunderbolt climbing through layered cloud like iron giants fighting the weight of winter itself. The weather turned against them almost immediately. Clouds thickened into a blinding wall. Ice crawled across the canopies. Instruments trembled under the strain of turbulence. There were no landmarks, no horizon, just an ocean of gray swallowing every sense a pilot depended on. When the bombers abandoned the mission, the Thunderbolts turned home, straight into headwinds no forecast had warned about. Winds over 100 miles per hour pushed the formation backward, toward France. Fuel gauges, once reassuring, began their slow, merciless drop. The Thunderbolt was legendary for its durability, but not even its massive tanks could fight the sky itself. Pilots, some barely past their third combat mission, realized that they were now racing against empty space inside their own aircraft. Among them was Lieutenant William Edward Roach, flying a spare P-47 he hadn't expected to use. He had joined the formation only because another pilot's engine faltered minutes after takeoff. Now he was alone in the storm, navigating by dead reckoning, hoping the compass would lead him toward the English coast. When he finally broke free of the clouds at 8,000 feet, he expected to see the channel's dark water. Instead, he saw farmland, French farmland. The winds had carried him far off course, and the fuel left in his tanks could barely keep the engine turning for 40 minutes. Below him lay an airfield with grass runways, parked vehicles, and orderly dispersal bays. It looked British. It felt like salvation. Roach descended, lowered his gear, and touched down with the smooth precision of a pilot trained to trust his machine. A jeep rolled toward him. Ground crew waited. Then he saw the rifles, the uniforms, the unmistakable posture of men who did not come to help, What he believed was safety was, in fact, a Luftwaffe base near Caen. Within hours, Roach was disarmed and on a truck headed deep into Germany. Behind him, the Thunderbolt he had just abandoned, intact, undamaged, and filled with answers the Luftwaffe had been desperate to find, became the most valuable captured aircraft in Europe. And he was not the only pilot lost to the wind that day. One Thunderbolt bellied into a field. Another ditched over icy water and vanished. A third limped home on fumes, crossing the English coast as the engine died beneath him. No enemy fighters had appeared. No flak had been fired. Nature alone had turned the mission into disaster. But for Germany, Roach's misfortune was an extraordinary gift. A perfect P-47 Thunderbolt delivered into their hands. A chance to see inside the American machine, both the aircraft and the industrial system that produced it. When the Luftwaffe towed the captured P-47 Thunderbolt into a hangar at Rechlin, their premier test center, German engineers expected to uncover flaws, wasteful design choices, structural inefficiencies, something that explained why this oversized American fighter persisted in the World War II air war despite its apparent crudity. What they discovered instead forced them to confront a truth they had never fully understood. Hans Werner Lerche, one of Germany's most seasoned test pilots, walked around the aircraft with the quiet discipline of a man who had flown over 100 different airframes. Everything about the Thunderbolt challenged his instincts. German fighters like the Bf-109 and FBB-190 were tight, efficient, minimalist. Their fuselages were elegant shells of lightweight alloy, machines shaped by craftsmen who believed perfection came from precision and restraint. The Thunderbolt, by comparison, looked almost agricultural. Thick panels, massive spars, a cockpit roomy enough for a pilot to half stand inside. But aviation truths do not live in appearances. They reveal themselves in the air. Lerche climbed into the cockpit, started the R2800 engine, and felt the entire aircraft vibrate with a deep, uneven rumble that seemed primitive compared to Germany's smooth, inline engines. Yet as the radial warmed, the vibration settled. Temperatures stabilized.
We honor your dedication and
Oil
sacrifice.
pressure held. The machine behaved as though it simply didn't care about small imperfections, an early hint of the philosophy that built it. The takeoff roll was long and heavy, almost clumsy, but once the Thunderbolt climbed past 20,000 feet, everything changed. The turbocharger came alive. Power surged. Controls tightened. The fighter that had felt like a truck suddenly responded with the precision of a much lighter machine. Lerche rolled, dived, and climbed with growing disbelief. The Thunderbolt could hold energy through maneuvers that should have bled its speed away. In a dive, it accelerated faster than anything he'd flown. In a climb, it refused to surrender momentum. German engineers documented each flight, then dismantled the aircraft piece by piece. What they found shocked them more than its performance at altitude. The Thunderbolt was intentionally overbuilt. Frame members were nearly twice the thickness of German equivalents. Wing spars resembled those of a medium bomber. Fuselage skins were so thick that German calculations labeled them wastefully excessive. But in the margins of those reports were notes that revealed a dawning realization. The Americans hadn't designed the Thunderbolt to be perfect. They had designed it to survive, to absorb battle damage, to tolerate imperfect manufacturing, to be built by thousands of workers with varied skill levels, then repaired in muddy fields by crews with only basic tools. Every thick rib, every heavy spar, every redundant system. Each was a clue pointing toward American industrial power, a system designed to produce fighters, not one at a time, but in waves. Lerche understood it first. The Thunderbolt was not a masterpiece of engineering. It was a masterpiece of strategy. And its strength in the air was only one part of the larger storm Germany was about to face. By early 1944, the truth that German engineers uncovered inside the captured P-47 Thunderbolt began to reveal itself across the skies of Europe. What the Luftwaffe faced was no longer a contest of pilot skill or aircraft agility. It had become a confrontation with a national engine of production and training that Germany could neither outrun nor outlast. The numbers told the story with cruel clarity. While German factories struggled to deliver fighters, hampered by shortages of aluminum, fuel, and experienced labor, American assembly lines filled the docks of England with wave after wave of new machines. Hundreds of Thunderbolts each month. Thousands of replacement pilots from the US Army Air Forces, many with triple the flight hours of their German counterparts. Where Germany produced excellence in small batches, America produced competence at continental scale. The human cost inside the Luftwaffe began rising faster than commanders could absorb. Veteran pilots, men who had survived the earliest, hardest years of the World War II air war, were now being lost to coordinated Allied tactics and relentless American firepower. New pilots arrived at frontline units with barely 100 hours of flight time. Some were sent into combat with only 10 hours in their assigned aircraft. Many never survived their first mission. And above them, the Thunderbolt's transformation from heavy fighter to high-altitude predator was becoming brutally clear. American squadrons adapted their tactics, climbing to 30,000 feet before crossing into German airspace. There, the P-47's turbocharged engine turned cold, thin air into an ally. German fighters climbing from below could not match the speed of Thunderbolts diving from the sun. The moment the Americans fired 8 50 caliber machine guns created a moving storm of metal that tore through wings, fuel tanks, cowlings, anything caught inside its path. German pilots described flying into those attacks as centering a wall. Even glancing hits degraded performance. A damaged Thunderbolt, however, often remained fully controllable. Pilots brought home aircraft riddled with holes, controls stiff, engines coughing, but still flying. The Luftwaffe, by contrast, flew machines so finely engineered that a single coolant leak or structural fracture could mean instant death. Bit by bit, Germany's aerial strength eroded. It was not a dramatic collapse, but a steady draining away. One squadron losing 3 aircraft here, another losing 5 pilots there. Every week, fewer veterans returned to base. Every month, new replacements lasted less time in combat. Luftwaffe leadership issued revised tactics, urging pilots to avoid high-altitude fights, to attack only with an advantage, to disengage whenever possible. But war does not pause for recovery. American formations flew deeper into Germany with heavier escorts and greater experience. The Thunderbolt's presence grew, not only as a fighter, but as a punishing ground attack machine that shredded rail lines, convoys, and armored columns. Every loss of infrastructure pushed Germany further into the dark. By late spring, one truth had become undeniable within Luftwaffe headquarters. Germany was no longer losing a battle in the air. It was losing the war of replacement. A war America had been preparing to fight long before the first Thunderbolt ever reached the front. From the American side, the unfolding reality of the World War II air war was not merely a testament to a single fighter's capability, but to a broader doctrine, one rooted in the nation's industrial confidence. The P-47 Thunderbolt, durable and forgiving, reflected the deeper philosophy of the U.S. Army Air Forces. Build machines that average pilots could fly, maintain, repair, and return to combat with minimal delay. It was aviation shaped not in laboratories, but on factory floors, where production speed mattered as much as elegance. This industrial logic became a lens through which the world viewed American strategy. Allies recognized that the United States was demonstrating something unprecedented, a wartime system powerful enough to replace losses faster than an enemy could inflict them. Britain saw in America not just a partner, but a nation capable of sustaining a long war. The Soviet Union, fighting its own brutal struggle, took note of the overwhelming flow of aircraft and supplies crossing oceans. Neutral nations understood that America's strength lay not simply in technology, but in the reliability of its logistics. Meanwhile, the Luftwaffe, once Europe's dominant air arm, felt the consequences most sharply. They knew how to build extraordinary fighters. They did not know how to build thousands of them without sacrificing performance. They trained superb pilots, but could not train them in industrial quantities. With each month, as Thunderbolts and Mustang escorts tightened control over German skies, the Luftwaffe's strategic options narrowed. Even successful missions cost Germany irreplaceable men and machines. The American approach extended beyond the battlefield. After the war, the United States absorbed key German engineers through Operation Paperclip, including those who once evaluated the captured Thunderbolt. The message was unmistakable. America not only outproduced its enemies, but also learned from them, deepening its technological lead for the era ahead. The world recognized this blend of industrial might and intellectual pragmatism as a defining feature of American power. In the end, nations watching the air war understood that the Thunderbolt's legacy was larger than its combat record. It symbolized a truth shaping the modern age. Wars would be determined not only by bravery or innovation, but by systems, vast, coordinated, resilient. And in that realm, the United States had proven itself unmistakably built different. By the final year of the World War II air war, the lesson that began with a single lost fighter near Caen had become unmistakable. The P-47 Thunderbolt was never meant to be perfect. It was meant to endure, through weather, through battle, through the long grind of a conflict fought across continents. And in its thick skin, redundant systems, and thundering radial engine, America revealed something far more powerful than aerodynamic elegance. It revealed the strength of a nation willing to build not just fighters, but the industrial machine behind them. For the U.S. Army Air Forces, the Thunderbolt became a symbol of what American warfighting would increasingly depend on: resilience, scale, and the ability to bring thousands of ordinary airmen home alive. Pilots remembered its cockpit, not for beauty, but for space. They remembered the ways it stayed in the air, even after absorbing punishment no other fighter could survive. They remembered that when the sky turned against them, the aircraft under them did not. To the Luftwaffe, the Thunderbolt's presence became something heavier than metal. It was a reminder that Germany was no longer fighting a series of aerial duels. It was fighting a system. Factories, rail lines, oil fields, training schools, and a workforce spread across an ocean. They could shoot down thunderbolts, and they did, often with skill and courage. But the truth was unavoidable. America's strength was not measured in single victories, but in the tens of thousands of hands that built, rebuilt, and flew these fighters every day. The legacy of the P-47 is not simply its impressive kill ratios or the miles of wrecked rail lines it left across Europe. Its legacy is the idea that victory in modern war belongs to the side that can sustain the fight. To the side whose machines can fail gracefully, whose pilots can learn from mistakes instead of dying from them, whose industry can absorb losses without collapsing. That was the heart of American industrial power, and it reshaped the air war forever. As we look back on that era, one question lingers for us today. In a world that still depends on readiness, logistics, and the capacity to endure, do we still understand the value of what the Thunderbolt represented? Thank you for joining this journey into a chapter of aviation history that still echoes across our world. If stories like this speak to you, stories of courage, engineering, and the systems that shape destiny, consider joining us for the next one. There is always more to uncover, more to remember, and more to learn from the past.